Hi there, folks. My name's Novoin24, and welcome to another year! In fact, not just another episode, but another year of the Three Grumpy Simmers. Yes, we are back once again, and I am joined by my two grumpy colleagues. Once again, I'm joined by Drew BelGeode.
Howdy, folks. Happy
And
2020 to you.
happy 2020 to you, my friend, and welcome, of course, to Sérgio, editor-in-chief of Helisimmer.com.
Hey guys, happy 2020.
I must admit, I just sort of threw my own intro off a little bit there at the moment because the cameras, as you can tell, what we do this with the camera systems decides to rearrange itself randomly every time we do this concert. So I'm used to Drew being in one particular spot of the cameras, and then it's just completely thrown me on this episode. So we're off to a great start for 2020.
Yes. New Year, same technically challenged simmers. Well done. Well done.
We had to preserve something from the past.
Yeah.
We preserve the good things from the past. Right. All right. So, folks, yes, once again, yes, sorry, absolutely, it is a new year. We are off to an exciting start. We're very hopeful start. Of course, we rounded out last year by thinking about all the things that we're looking forward to this year in the 2020, and we gazed into our crystal ball. Not many of those things, the predictions that we had have come true as yet, but we are, it is only a few weeks old.
Give it 2 more weeks. 4 weeks according to my crystal ball. I'm just saying.
Has somebody trademarked that yet? Please tell me someone's trademarked that. So obviously, I'm sure somehow I have a funny feeling that many of you were thinking that we were going to be talking about the elephant in the room or / the simulator in the room, that of course would be Microsoft. But we won't be talking directly about it. Instead, we're going to be talking about something which I feel like we may have actually talked about in the past, but it seems to be something that we feel, in fact, that we feel comes up with monotonous regularity.
It's a recurring theme. Definitely a
Yeah.
recurring theme. Yeah.
And many of you, our viewers, often sort of commentate that we appear less than actually grumpy. When we do these shows, we're going to touch on a topic. We're going to touch on and cover a topic and go through a topic today, which makes us grumpy in a weirdly funny / frustrating way, and we hope that everybody takes an opportunity to listen to words of. I was going to say wisdom. I possibly may not be the best choice of phrase.
Coming from us now.
Yeah.
So, new year, new beginnings. So one of the things that we see pop up with monotonous regularity in all of the various forums, websites, discords, Facebook groups, MIRC. Does anybody even still use MIRC? Maybe. Come on, Sergio. If anyone's gonna still use it,
It's been ages. No, it's been
There are,
ages. Wow.
no, there are channels active. There are guys still using it. Yes.
Right. Okay. Or even on /r Reddit / and a common question, of course, is I'm going to talk about the most infamous question. Is that Luna? Or was that
No,
your
that's
cat's
actually no, that's one of my cats. Yeah, it is yeah. It's
Luna's
been
not in here,
severely
I don't
just
think.
Oh.
no. It's trying to smash the door and get it.
Right. Okay. Break the door down. Okay, it's good because see, folks,
Yeah.
this topic makes us so
Yeah.
grumpy. It even made Sergio's cat grumpy. So
Oh yeah.
the question, of course, comes
Man.
out where we see this question of, "Hi, I've just bought insert sim name here. What are all the add-ons that I need for insert sim here now to get right away to start with?"
Add the extra word must have, which
Sorry.
I know is 2 words, but it's usually hyphenated whenever they
Yep.
send their request. But yeah, what are the must have
Yes.
add-ons?
The air quote must haves add-ons. Now there's there's two parts we're going to look at this for today. We're going to talk about the overall sim experience that you do have as a user, and then we're going to talk about your personal, and then sort of tangentially we're talking about the content experience as well. Um, so the first one is probably fundamentally a performance one. And I'm sort of going to throw to you, Sergio, for this one. Because in a way, this very much relates to computer programming and computers and computer performance. What is the fundamental thing that generally breaks a computer or a software package's performance?
People.
That ID10T error, yes.
Yes, people. Whenever you get people working with a computer system, yeah, things just break, and that's a known fact. That has been known since the dinosaurs wandered the Earth, and that's why they disappeared.
Sorry, I have this vision of a T-Rex.
That's really stretching it.
I have a vision of a
Yeah.
T-Rex tapping away coding Python.
Yeah, that's T-Rex were the testers. They were within little mouses and would trying to
The first alpha testers, and because they broke the NDA, the meteor wiped them all out. Let that be a cautionary tale to all of you. You know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, that's why we are not breaking the NDA. But yes, well, but the thing is, I say this as a joke in both security and performance. But the thing is, when you get people in the middle, things break. And why do things break? Because people tend to do not so. I don't want to say stupid things, but not so smart things on software. And the more stuff you get into a piece of software, the more your computer has to do, right? The more resources it uses, the more CPU it uses, more RAM it uses, the more graphics card it uses in some cases. Mm-hmm. And especially if you're using add-ons that are working outside the scope of the sim and doing their own drawing on the monitor, you have the actual sim doing its thing, and then you have add-ons doing their thing and throwing stuff into the monitor. So all this just stresses your machine. The more stuff you get into, the more add-ons you get into something, the better the performance. The worse the performance will be. So that's what breaks and what starts to get software to get slower and slower. Don't do that.
And I guess beyond that as well is it is, and I think it goes to, and it partially goes to the core of what you're talking about here is the incessant tweaking that our community can sometimes get hung up on. Now, I'm not saying that, and we are not saying that all tweaking is bad, but it is one of those things where if you're taking, when simulators are produced, they've gone through, especially the flagship ones, Prepared, X-Plane, F16 Edition, DCS, the baseline sim that's shipped to you has gone through extensive testing. So it's functional, it works. And to see how it works with your hardware, you should probably run it as in its baseline configuration for a while before you start messing with it. And because that's sort of a thing that at least I've come across with IT professionally in IT a lot, is that the first question sort of becomes into, okay, what's your delta between baseline, what you're running and baseline, and you need to run it at a baseline configuration first to confirm that that's not, that's working okay.
Yeah, you mentioned tweaking, but we need to understand that there are two ways of tweaking software. One of them is you get the base, you have the base software, and you just, you change the settings on the software to get better performance or better image, or try to get the balance between both and get good performance with the good image quality. And it's another thing for you to tweak. And I'm using the air quotes because it's not quite exactly tweaking, but people consider it tweaking when you start adding software layers on top of the sim to get better image quality. For example, I'm thinking shaders.
Shaders and so on.
that's stuff that makes the sim look better. Well, depends on the opinions, but it makes the sim look more the way you want the sim to look.
Mm.
But by doing it, you are adding layers of software which will get your computer to have to work extra to show that on some cases, not all cases, but on some cases. And by adding those new layers of software, you are also inducing the possibility of bugs, issues, problems
Mm.
that you may have. You may not even have them when you just finish installing, and after a few weeks, but it can go back and bite you on the behind if an update of this for the sim comes, or something gets corrupted or something goes wrong. It can bite you,
Mm.
and you may have to spend hours getting the sim back to what it was, and lose hours of simming and lose your patience and go nuts, go overall nuts because of it, just because you want to make it look prettier, and in my opinion, it's not worth it. I don't spend any time tweaking and using shaders and whatnot just to make it look a bit more pretty. I have a limited sim time. So all the time that I want to spend on my sim is actually simming, not fixing the sim. So I just wanted to make this to make this note, because there is a difference between adjusting the sliders and start throwing stuff into the sim.
Yeah. And
And it's a very slippery slope to go down. Once you start adding stuff that's not necessarily needed for the sim, all of a sudden it never becomes enough. Always have to have something else. And that's how they get you, folks. That's how they get you.
and and folks, we're as I said, we don't want to discourage you from adding content in your sim. Far from it, because I mean, all three of us are content producers. We've all sort of had and assisted other developers and companies and produce our own content for you guys to share in your sims. But at the same time, it's all about doing it in moderation and being aware of the consequences of what you do. And
Right.
that sort of the big key part that we really want to cover off here, and it will head into our second part, which I think is a great segue into this, because we're going to flick between our two copies here, but it's a good segue into the second half of this compact of what is the must-have add-ons for my sim, is how do you sim? How do you sim? So now, the three of us, we have a stupidly large amount of simming experience between the three of us. And all three of us sim in very, very different ways. And our simming is, each of us, unique. And your simming, as a viewer, your simming is unique as well. Now, just going to throw it straight away out there that none of the three of us enjoy tube liners.
That's correct.
Yeah.
We just don't.
Yeah.
I've done my time. I run the VA for 2 years. I'm done. That's work. I have no desire to do tube liners ever.
Now, for all of you who do enjoy tube liners as simming, we do not want to invalidate your simming experience. Far from it. Because if that's how you want to enjoy your sim, as Sergio pointed out, the vast majority of us have very limited time for simming between work,
Right.
family, and every other commitment that this world throws at us. We all have limited things to do. So that's something to bear in mind when before you ask the question, or when somebody asks the question of what are the must-haves, because what are the must-have add-ons for my simulator? So okay, here you go. Pop quiz for question without notice for my two grumpy colleagues. Let's say I was a brand new simmer, and I jumped onto a forum and I said this. I said, right, I've just got Lockheed Martin's prepared version 4.5. By the way, it is prepared, folks, not prepared 3D. That hurts me every time a ferry dies. Every time you say prepared 3D. Just so you know. Right. So I've just got prepared version 4.5. I've just installed. What are the must-have aircraft that I must put into my sim? What is the guaranteed first response? Or within the first 3 responses, what's the guaranteed response?
Oh, PMDG.
Thank you.
No.
Oh,
My response.
okay. So
No,
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 no, no,
no,
no,
I'm
no,
not
no, no,
saying
no.
that.
We're not saying your
That's not
response
my
because
response.
that's what we're getting to next. So
Okay.
that's right. But what would be the first? I would happily bet my house. Well, which is good because I don't actually own one. But I would, if I did, I would happily bet my house that one of the first 3 responses would be PMDG.
Okay.
And
I'll go with that.
Failing that, it would be Aerosoft Airbus Professional Series.
Yeah.
I can, without a doubt, those would feature.
So basically, the thing is, let's just pause. Okay, let's just pause and think.
Stop.
I
Are we?
have
Wait. Are we going to have hammer time?
yes. let's just think about it for a second before we proceed. Let's just think this through. So this guy, probably a new simmer or an old simmer, whatever, doesn't matter, just installed this very advanced and very complex piece of software, a flight simulation software. I was almost going to say flight simulation game, but we just did that. A flight simulation software, very complex. Yes, it is. For the very first time, he just installed this. He has zero experience on the software. The guy doesn't even know how to use the camera system. The guy doesn't even know what the key bindings are. He probably knows that that G stands for landing gear and whatnot. But it's the first time. It's the first time that this guy is going to touch this flight sim, and you are telling him to get the most complex airliner or one of the most complex airliners or aircraft in the sim that bogs down performance, changes a lot, and it's just outright complex. You're
And
telling
probably
this
costs
guy,
more than the sim that he just bought.
yes, and you would probably, spend that money better by getting a joystick because probably the guy has an old joystick at all has been seen. So you're saying this guy to get this very complex add-on for him to use on a piece of software that he doesn't know the first thing about it, right? That's what us as a community, not us the 3 of us, but us as a general community, is telling these people. Just get this complex piece of software, have another layer of complexity on top of it, and just go have fun. And if you have any issues,
remember, you can't have fun because you're simulating a
you're
real
talking about you're talking about prepared. I am sorry.
Yes,
I
and you can't have fun because it's not for personal entertainment use. Remember that, folks.
Yes. So go not have fun then. And if you happen to have to spend 10 hours trying to fix anything on the sim instead of simming, well, that's part of the thing, isn't it? No, it's not. Guys, no, it's not. Just let the guy get to know this first. Then get him to add some simple stuff, not complex stuff. Just small add-ons. I'm sorry, Tristan. I just needed to break this.
No, and that's and that is exactly right because that's exactly kind of what I want to highlight is that I know, and this is, again, comes back to what we just said before, which is we're not invalidating anybody's sim experience, but we've gone, the community by and large, when they get asked this question, the answer is PMDG, Aerosoft, Orbix. Now there is the quality of all 3 of those add-on producers is fantastic. I am not disputing, none of us are disputing that in any way, shape, or form. However, Sérgio makes the point of going. These are new pilots. These are new users. These are new players. They need to establish their baseline. What's their baseline experience? And further to that, as we sort of pointed out earlier, even if just using myself as an example, if I'd come into this and even if I'd never flown flight sims before, tube liners still do not interest me. So everybody telling me to go and spend double or triple what the flight sim costs to be able to pick up an add-on that I will never fly or never be interested in.
Right.
That's where's the benefit for my simming experience going to be there, and how do we feel as a community? How do you think that represents us? So as a thank you very much, Sergio, for that segue, because now we're going to go across to what we as the grumpy simmers feel, and if for anyone who's ever seen us interact on all of these forums and Facebook threads and all the rest of it, when we see this question, the three of us will come up with some paraphrase of the answer that I feel Drew is about to his version of this comment that he was about to give you. I'm going to put you on the spot there.
Before I actually do want to one thing just to kind of tie into what you just said. One of the byproducts that I have noticed whenever we get into this kind of a situation where people are just throwing out all the various names for all the add-ons that people absolutely positively have to have, it generally tends to lead to frustration on the part of the user. It also tends to lead to them asking more questions that, of course, frustrate people who already know the answers, but are either unwilling to help or, whatever the case may be. And what's the end result on that? The person who's trying to get into simming, who thinks this is going to be a great hobby for them, all of a sudden they're just totally overwhelmed and feel like a fish out of water. And chances are they're going to end up quitting. So we're actually doing the community a disservice whenever we're recommending all of this stuff. Now, with that having been said, typically, whenever I get asked that stuff or whenever I see that question asked, and usually I'm going to highlight one particular sim, X-Plane, because it seems to happen more with X-Plane than with any of the other sims that I also fly. Typically, my answer is this. The absolute must-have add-ons that you need to have in your sim is nothing. Why? In particular with X-Plane. When you first get X-Plane, especially if you're coming over from the ESP environment, that being FSX P3D, it's a whole different world. Yeah, it's similar in the fact that it's a flight simulator. It's similar in the fact that a lot of the aircraft are the same. You know the procedures on one, they do tend to translate over to the other sim. But there are fundamental differences. The control schemes are different. Yeah, some of the keys might be the same. You might use G to, do the landing gear on both sims. But I guarantee you that the way that the control sensitivity is, and I'm actually touching my Cytec X52 right now, the control sensitivities are vastly different between the two sims. So if you're coming over from P3D or FSX to X-Plane, one of the first things you need to set up your controls your way. Notice I didn't say properly. There is a difference.
Yes.
Properly for me might not be the same as for you. It's going to depend greatly on what hardware you're actually using with it. And when I say controls, also bear in mind that I use VR. VR is extremely important to me. I will not fly without it. So when I include VR in my control setup, I'm also including things like these, the touch controllers that go with VR, because both of the sims that we've been talking about, P3D and X-Plane, you can actually interact in the cockpit. Now, P3D doesn't have touch controllers implemented just yet, but something like DCS does as well. So you need to take that into consideration. You have VR. Are you planning on getting into VR? You need to think about how you want to set all of that stuff up. So you got to get your hardware set up first. Now, since we're on controls, there's another point of difference that takes a little getting used to, which actually I struggled with initially. And when I had first gotten into X-Plane, I'd actually given up on it until I met Austin and Frugal at one of the conventions a few years back. And, between the two of them, they talked me into giving it another shot. And that is the camera controls. Camera controls are very different from what we're used to with FSX and P3D.
Mm.
You're going to need to take some time to figure out the camera controls. And Tristan, I know you can probably attest to this because we
Oh,
just went through this when
dear
you had to set up your
God.
X-Plane all over again.
You know, that's
So yeah.
curious. That's curious. That's just a remark, Drew. I'm sorry. It's the most frustrating thing when changing scenes, and especially going to X-Plane. And this is something I
Right.
have seen with every single person that I know that came from the ESP platform to X-Plane. The camera controls get you frustrated.
Yep.
But
Yep.
guys, hear me out. The camera controls in X-Plane is vastly superior, in my
Yes.
opinion, to the one in the ESP platform. That's it, Drew. I'm sorry, just wanted to
Actually,
have this note.
and
Go
actually,
ahead.
I will 100% back that. As I said, and Drew just alluded to this. Sorry again, just stealing your thunder for a second. Drew.
No, go ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead.
It is, Drew's right. Is that, and he alluded to it. I have just recently gone through a X-Plane 11 rebuild because basically I'd had a lot of trouble with my X-Plane 11 build, partially because I will own this, that I was that guy that simply dumped stuff into their sim without actually paying attention to the consequences. I will own that. That was me, and my X-Plane 11 was absolutely rubbish. I couldn't even get 10 FPS with a default aircraft in SeaTac. Like, it was terrible. So I basically, I went, okay, I am scrapping it, and I went back to basics. So I went back to a clean install of X-Plane 11 and went through it step by step, line by line, actually relearned anything before I started buying or putting any add-ons in. And now, my X-Plane 11, I have minimal content in there. Very minimal. It is the only stuff that's in there is stuff that I'm reviewing. And very little else. Because I find actually is that when you do listen to people like Drew, who says you don't need anything other than the base sim, then, and once you get your controls right, which is again, rightly or wrongly, there is a setting in X-Plane that allows you to mirror default ESP keyboard controls. Piece of advice: don't do that. And
I could have told you that one.
again, but then but learning the camera controls, and once I actually was able to learn the camera controls, suddenly everything started falling into place. So, but yes, back to you, Drew, and learning controls. Yes.
Yeah, so controls, basically that just ties into the whole hardware aspect. You got to consider the hardware that you've got, first of all. You need to get that set up, and honestly, it's probably going to take you a week, 2 weeks to get really comfortable with it, because especially if you're coming over from, the ESP platform, it's going to take some adjusting before you're truly, truly comfortable with it. Now, with the hardware having been done, of course, there's, the software that you need to think about. You need to think about how your computer interacts with the program itself. So whether you need to tweak sliders to get the most amount of FPS, the thing is you should be able to establish a baseline. So you should be able to get decent FPS from the get-go with everything set however it is that, your computer seems to dictate that it needs to be set. And then you need to remember what you did, because if anything goes awry, you got to put it back to that baseline. So you got your hardware set up, you got your software set up. Again, probably about a week, 2 weeks, just to get everything the way you really want it and make sure that the program is functioning the way that you want it. Then, before you start thinking about add-ons, start thinking about your interests. Okay, maybe you're a tube-liner guy, but you only enjoy flying in South America. We need to know that. If you're going to ask us the question as far as, what kind of add-ons to get, maybe we can tell you, hey, Aerosoft has some great airports in South America that you might be interested in. Or maybe you're not a tube-liner guy at all. Maybe you're a helicopter guy. You want to know what is the best helicopter to learn from. Sérgio, I know you can vouch for this. We get asked that question a lot. What's the best helicopter to start out with? Again, that's the kind of stuff that you really shouldn't be asking this kind of stuff at the very well, you can if you want, but
it's not that bad of a helicopter, but it's not good. I don't think it's a good choice for someone that's learning how to fly helicopters now.
Right. If you're a brand new person, as we like to call them, newbies, to flight simulation, you're probably not going to want to start with something extremely complex. If you're new to aviation in general and you're using simulation as like a stepping stone to get there in real life, you definitely don't want to start with something complex at first. You want to go all the way down to the basics. Even if that's not what you're ideally interested in,
Yeah.
most of us start in Cessnas. There's nothing wrong with it. There's a perfectly good default. And actually, I'm trying to remember, does P3D still have a default Cessna 172 or
Uh,
something similar?
so they have they've got a default. Oh, it's a Carinado. It is something. It's not. They don't have a 172 anymore. That they didn't
Okay.
license that across, but they do have GA. They do have two very
Mm,
basic GA aircraft in there. So absolutely, and that's and actually thank you very much for bringing the aircraft up, because at the end of the day, folks, like, these are simulators. Now, all three of the major platforms out there. So, um, your Lockheed Martin's prepared, X-Plane 11, and DCS. All three are used for flight training, in some degree or other. Um,
right.
and as I've said before, full disclosure here, I work for Lockheed Martin, and we use it as part of my last project. We actually use it as part of ab initio pilot training. Um, and I know that a lot of flight schools use X-Plane 11, for their training, and I know that DCS has, or the engine, but the company behind DCS used the engine. Sergio, I believe that you were letting us know about that at some point, didn't you? Maybe I heard it
This
somewhere.
yeah, this CS has an yeah, this
Yeah,
CS has an engine
Mm,
professional.
yeah.
Yes.
The
they've had a history. They've had a history with that, in particular with like the United States Air Force with
Yeah,
the A-10C. Of
Yeah.
course, that's kind of how that all started. Plus, we know
exactly,
that some of the projects that we, the end user, have gotten to use started life as other private contract
exactly.
projects.
So so these sims are all valid sims, which means that the aircraft that get bundled with them, I know a lot of people seem to look down their noses at the aircraft that come with a default sim, but at the end of the day, if you're shipping out a simulator that can be used, that is used, can be used, and is used to train pilots, that the default stuff, your experience may vary, but at the end of the day, the quality is still nothing to snuff at. Um, so yes, it may not be the aircraft that you want to fly, but maybe using what both Sergio and Drew and myself, all three of us, has sort of been suggesting in this video, take your time to learn what your baseline is. So learn the
Hmm.
baseline of your simulator, learn the baseline of the aircraft, and then start doing your research from there.
Absolutely.
Mm,
You gotta crawl
Yeah.
before you can walk. You gotta walk before you can
It's
run.
yeah.
Every single human on this planet goes through that.
yep.
It's a path.
That's
It's a path, and we all need to follow. It's not only a path, but simming it's quite personal. Although a lot of us share interests, simming is quite personal, and
It's extremely
everything
personal
that
journey.
Drew just said, I share his opinion, and in a way, me and Drew are kind of the old grumpy guys on the groups and forums telling people the same thing over and over again. You know, it's not very unusual for
uh,
you to see someone asking this question and Drew replying and me going this, or me replying and Drew
or
going
vice
this. So,
versa. Yep,
yeah,
yep.
so we're always struggling and trying to educate people and get people to understand that this is a path and you're not going to go from point A to point B instantly, and it's a personal path. It's a very personal path, and one of the things that it kind of gets under my skin is how people just throw in add-on names without understanding, like Drew said,
Mm.
what are the needs, what are the expectations, and what is it that people want to take from the sim. You know, people install X-Plane and go, what are the must-have add-ons, and all of a sudden I get the Zibo and I get the PMDG. Well, not the PMDG for X-Plane, but
Well,
I have
you're not going to find that for X-Plane, no.
Yeah, no, yeah,
But like Tolis or Jar Design or
yeah,
any of the other
you have
countless
all
names and
this,
whatnot.
and let's just think again for a second. And what do I fly? I don't fly two-liners. Mm-mm-mm-mm. And I probably am not interested in getting orbits to Earth, United States. I fly in this small country in Europe called Portugal, and that's pretty much it. I don't even fly outside the country most of the time, just for reviews and getting pretty pictures and whatnot. So it's you need to understand what people want to take from the simming experience, and then tell them what to get. And I would like to give a final piece of advice, which has to do with what I do as a developer, but it should be kind of common sense. Let's say that you have asked the community the right questions, you have been directed the right way, and people give you a list of 3, 4, 5, 6 add-ons for you to install on your sim, whatever sim that is. So you have perhaps a couple of aircraft, you have a scenery, you have, for example, something that helps you with the frame rate, for example, 3J FPS for X-Plane. Yeah. No, a few simple add-ons that supposedly don't mess with your sim, and you can install it. Do yourself and all of us a favor and do not install them all at once.
Sorry, Sergio, 1 second.
Yeah.
Everybody, Sergio's going to repeat what he just said. Okay, he's going to repeat what he just said.
Please repeat it.
Because this is really important. Sorry, please, Sergio, would you like to rephrase that again?
Yes. If you have more than one add-on to install on your sim, do not install them all at once. Do not install them all at the same time. Do not install all so that you have the experience with any of those add-ons for the first time together with all the other add-ons. And why is that? Because if something breaks, you have no freaking clue. You'll have no freaking clue what's up. Okay? So, install an add-on. Install the first add-on. Try it for 1 hour, 2 hours, 5 minutes, 10 minutes. Doesn't matter. Just make sure it's working properly. Mm-hmm. Make sure that, from the baseline, from the non-add-on baseline you had installed, things don't go weirdly or go bad. Because if you have, on the default system 170 on a given airport, you have 40 FPS, 50 FPS, and you install this add-on that, injects weather or does something simple, or it's just an aircraft. And all of a sudden you go from 40 FPS to 10, I think I know what the culprit was, right? Mm-hmm. And was that add-on. And when you
let's back it up a second though. Before you actually install these add-ons one by one, before you even get to all of that, one key thing you need to do, Tristan, back me up on this one. Read the manual. I can't stress that enough. They put readmes and instructions with every single add-on for a reason. It doesn't matter what flight sim it is. You need to understand how these things are going to interact with your sim and what could go wrong if you mess it up.
So, not going to lie on this, I actually did an experiment a few years ago when I was first starting out in texture design and releasing textures. I actually would put, because I got sick of fielding questions of how do I put this livery into my sim, I actually changed the name of the README file to do not read me.
How did that work out?
I got less questions. I legitimately got less questions. So, but no, seriously, folks. The phrase RTFM exists for a reason.
It's
And
not just to make fun of people. There is some actual.
there is actual need to this because and actually, funnily enough, it's so Sergio talked before about how simming is a very personal journey, and it is. It's an incredibly personal journey, and one that I fervently believe in, that you create your own simulated experience. What experience you will get, the experience you want out of the sim. Um, you will get the experience out of it that you want to put, that that you put into
And
it.
it's very easy to get frustrated. It's very, very, very easy to get frustrated. It can completely destroy your experience with sim.
Right.
Yeah.
And you have been there. I have been there myself with X-Plane. And when I talked
We've
about
all
the
been
camera, we have been there. When I talked about the camera system and the user interface were the two things that took me away from X-Plane when I first tried it in with X-Plane 10. And
X-Plane 10
well,
was like no offense, it was actually a great sim, but the UX design was abominable.
yeah,
Yeah.
yes, it
Anyway.
was. And those were the two things that took. Because here's the thing: if you are a guy starting for the first time on Sims, you are entering a genre that you don't well or you don't do all. And if you have a bad experience, you'll start to think, okay, this genre sucks,
Yep.
and you may drop it altogether.
Mm.
If you are using a certain sim, for example, Prepared or Explain or DCS, and you want to try other sims, and you have a bad experience, you'll just stick with what you use, with what you're
What you
using
know.
right now,
Yeah.
which is not bad in the way that you're using a good piece of software. But the thing is, you're not widening your horizons. You are not knowing what's out there beyond the sim that you are using. And I feel that for us as simmers, it just narrows your view so much that you start to lose the experience of trying a lot of different and amazing things in sims
Mm.
that that particular sim won't be able to give you.
And there's and I feel that's beginning to go into a whole topic of conversation of this whole vitriol from my sim's better than your sim thing. I think
Yeah, that's
we'll
a
leave
whole
that
new
to,
that's a
I
whole new
think
topic.
forgive me, Sergio, I think we
That's a
might
whole
leave that
new
one for another
topic. No, I'm just
conversation.
I'm just
Yeah,
talking
bottom
about.
But no,
line.
you're right. But
Yeah,
you're
the
right.
learning curve.
Having that
It's the-
negative experience, whether it and again, folks, we as a community play into a new users, a new players experience. It will their experience will be driven by the sim that they have, the controls they have, the software that we tell them to put in, if we tell them to do anything, and how we react to them. So it's something that is always, think of, and one thing that I think that we all ask is that many of us have been simming for a very, very long time, but we all started somewhere. And potentially, I know we said it's not going to be about Microsoft's new flight sim, but at the same time, in a way, it kind of is, because every sim starts somewhere. Every simmer starts somewhere. It starts with the only thing that's there is what ships with that sim. So
and people need to enjoy it more. I think people need to enjoy
Right.
value it more.
and that's a
Yeah.
bottom line is that at the end of the day, folks, however you want your simming experience to be is a very unique, very personal journey. But if you're not enjoying it, ask yourself why. So
Yeah.
All right.
Gotta get to the root of it.
I
One
think
important thing that I
yes.
do want to point out as well, whenever you see us online, if of course you're in the same social networking circles that we are, and you see us give the answers that we've outlined in this particular video, don't try to give us flack for it, because we're not doing it from a place of, wanting to offend anyone or turn anyone off. These are just, basic facts. You gotta learn to crawl for and walk. Yeah, it's great that, people are offering all of these suggestions, but at the end of the day, 9 times out of 10, and we see this over and over and over, The only thing that it really does is ends up confusing and overwhelming the person. So take a step back if you need to, rewind the video and listen to what I said, or you'll see it online soon enough anyway, because I'm sure somebody's probably going to ask it again tomorrow. You know, start
Yeah.
adopting that approach, because think about when you first came in. You may or may not have had somebody to tell you this. And I can almost guarantee you, the three of us, when we first came in, more than likely, we did not have anybody offering this advice. We had to learn all this stuff the hard way. So we're just
Yeah.
trying to impart the wisdom to you. And the
And
only thing that
remember,
I would ask, pay it
yeah.
forward.
And
Remember,
yeah.
remember this piece of information, which is, I think, just 99.9% of the issues I've seen with sims have to do with add-ons. It's not the sim; it's usually an add-on.
Yep.
So just be careful with what we install. Be careful with how we install it. Try things as you go. Don't just cram things into your sim, because chances are something is going to blow, and it's not because the sim is not good. It's because if you broke it. So just keep that in mind and take a deep breath and do things one step at a time. It takes time, but it will pay out in the future.
And as my closing thoughts, I mean, and I will own it and say that, and as Drew pointed out, we speak this out for. Yes, as Drew pointed
It's
out,
probably backwards, but I don't care.
when
No, it's not.
when we all started,
Okay.
when we all started, we've been simming long enough that there wasn't somebody around to give us the advice that we're hopefully passing on to you guys. That we had to learn this the hard way. The number of times I got reinstalling FSX down to a fine art. I was able to reinstall it up to my baseline within about 8 hours, 6 to 8 hours, and that was a whole slew of content that went in there. But that was my baseline. But when I would put something in and break it back then, because I was not necessarily, it took me a few years before I learned that only put one new add-on in at a time. And I so this comes to us, if it comes to you guys from a point of experience, and I will own being the guy for X-Plane that dumped a whole heap of stuff in at the same time, and it broke it. And I knew straight away that it was my fault, and I had no idea what one of the add-ons it was that broke it. So I have gone through and done it the right way and started clean slate and putting in one thing at a time. And you know what? I have now a version of X-Plane 11 that looks great with there's minimal content in there, and it's running 50 to 60 FPS, no problems at all. Doesn't even skip a heartbeat. So,
And thankfully, with X-Plane, it's a little bit different from P3D and FSX, because X-Plane really doesn't care where you put it or if you have multiple versions of it. I always tell people, always keep a backup. Keep a fresh copy of your X-Plane as a backup, because you never know when you're going to need it. It might be that you want to try, the beta version of X-Plane for some great feature that's coming out. I think right now the latest one is the Vulkan, which is, as of the time of this recording, not yet in public beta. It's still in private
Mhm.
beta. But yeah, with X-Plane in particular, make sure that you set yourself up a second copy, a pristine copy. You can do the same thing with P3D. Like, I actually have a second copy of P3D on a different hard drive that I never touch unless it's needed. Never know when you're going to need it. So if you got the hard drive space, I highly recommend that you do that. Keep a backup copy somewhere, just in case you mess something up.
So there you go. So that's been Grumpiness for the start of 2020. So we hope that this episode has been inspirational, or at least give you all some guidance for the future and how we see the world. And please feel free to share your thoughts in down below. Well, with that, folks, we are going to wrap this episode up. As I said, first episode of 2020. Thank you very much. So I'm going to say thank you very much to Sérgio from Helisimmer.com for joining us today.
Bye.
And thank you very much to Drew, Mr. BelGeode. Thank you for joining us.
My pleasure as always, folks. You know where to find us. Ciao.
Alright, folks, and so, of course, my name's been Nova24. Don't forget, as always, to like the video and subscribe to the channel if you're enjoying these videos and want to see more. And, of course, if you said this is, of course, tongue tied. I need to.
Let's try that in English.
Let's try that again, shall we? It's hot here in Australia. Okay, I managed to not be on fire. So, folks, if you've been watching this on YouTube, so just in case you didn't know, we are also on Podbean, so you can listen to this without looking at us if you didn't want to. And conversely, if you've been listening to this on Podbean, you can go and watch the video and see our beautiful, ugly mugs while doing this, and Sérgio's awesome background for his little office there. And as always, and folks, if you want to, we do have a Patreon. The link is in the description down below, where you can get access to future episodes early if you do throw us some support for that. So, folks, thanks very much for joining us. As I said before, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel if you enjoy these videos and want to see more. And don't forget to subscribe to both of these gentlemen. All right, folks, take care, safe skies to all, and we'll see you next time. Bye for now.